Hi everyone, in just a few days from now, the Diablo 4 open beta will finally launch, the moment we've been waiting for, and I want to give you guys my top 5 tips to prepare you ahead of time about the most important basics of the game, how to have a smooth start, because I've already played it and there are a few things worth knowing. So let's get started. So number one is when you finish creating your character after you've done all the customization and entered your name, you'll be able to log in and you will be asked to choose one of two difficulties, Adventurer and Veteran. So those are the two starting difficulties. There are 3 more that unlock later in the game, but we won't have access to those in this open beta because it ends at level 25. So you can play those 2 difficulties from the start. And there's not really all that much difference between them actually. The first one is tailored towards complete newcomers to the game and just not really gamers in general, I guess. But it doesn't seem like the difficulty really rises all that much. But for the second difficulty on Veteran, you actually get a 20% XP bonus and more drops and gold and these kind of things. So in my opinion, if you are in any way believing in your ability to play a video game, you should probably just go with Veteran and you have a faster start. The early game is not really all that hard. Number 2, making a functional build. So there are a few basics that you should consider when you're trying to make your own character, making your own build. In general, Diablo 4 is quite forgiving with respeccing, especially in the early game, and it just becomes more expensive later down the line. So you can experiment a lot in this beta, and you won't really have that much trouble like undoing some mistakes on your skill tree or changing your main ability all around and these kind of things. But in general, you should focus on one main ability and use that as like your normal attack as much as possible when your resources allow it. Here's a screenshot of what the skill tree looks like in the game. So every class starts here at the top with the basic skills, and then once you have spent 2 points, you can unlock the core skills, and those are the bread and butter of your build. So this is, for example, the sorcerer tree, and there's the fireball, and there's the frozen orb, and then some ice shards and these kind of things. And you want to pick one of those abilities as your main skill in most cases. There are obviously also some combos possible with maybe 2 different skills and these kind of things. But from what I've gathered from when I played, most of the time it's better to just go down the road with like one main ability, and you can try to fit in other abilities that also do some damage later down the line. For example, again on the sorcerer tree further down the line, there are these mastery skills. So there's Meteor, for example, and Flame Wall. And those are like cooldown based skills, or they can give you some extra procs, for example, with the enchantment slots. So you can invest into several abilities in some cases, but most of the time the core skill is what you're going for. So you shouldn't just fill your entire skill bar with these 6 different core skills and invest 1 point here and 1 point there. Just take one and then fill the rest of your skill slots, for example, with the basic attack, some utility, some movement, and maybe some extra ultimate skill or something like that to deal damage when you need it. You don't have that many skill slots and you have very few points to spend on a skill tree in general, and there are a bunch of like very useful passive abilities as well that, for example, boost your damage or defenses, and you can usually just get much more out of the entire skill tree by investing into those together with one main skill. Tip number 3, weapons matter a lot. So when you start out the game, you will level up and gain levels frequently and find a lot of loot very frequently as well. And this will slow down over time as you go to higher levels. This is pretty much the nature of any ARPG, but in this case, the weapon is the by far most impactful item in your entire build. You want to make sure that you always equip the highest DPS weapon that you own. So make sure every time you pick up a weapon, especially in the early levels, try to check it out and equip it if it has a higher DPS value than your current one. Obviously, there might be exceptions in case you have like a legendary effect that is very useful for your build. If you get lucky with a nice drop or so, you might want to replace that later. But in general, higher DPS wins. So this is pretty basic, but it can definitely speed up your early game progression. The rest of the gear, the armor pieces and jewelry, doesn't matter all that much because they all roll rather low values. So there are some quite good stats, for example, movement speed on boots that you might want to look out for. But in general, it's not really as impactful as the weapon. So make sure you have a good one. And for the armor slots, yeah, don't really spend too much time on deciding what is better or not. Just go with what you have and maybe try to find some good legendaries later down the line. Tip number 4, find objectives to complete to progress your character, both for XP and loot. So for example, while you're running around the zones, you will find these random side events. You can see this here. with this orange circle, for example. This is one of those local events. But there's also the campaign itself. So as you play through the beta, you will be able to complete the entire Act 1 of the campaign. And those campaign quests are also very juicy in terms of the experience you gain from completing them. So just doing that will already probably bring you close to level 20 if you just want to do that and unlock the puppy, or just reach max level for the beta in general. So what I'm getting at is that you shouldn't just like aimlessly wander around and trying to grind monsters in the middle of nowhere. Because, yeah, you can do that, but it's not really very effective. You don't get a lot of loot, you don't get a lot of XP. All the juicy stuff is really in those events and in those side quests and all these kind of things. And there are a lot of them, so you're not really gonna run out of anything to do. And just following whatever just comes your way is already a good step. Obviously, I don't want to discourage anyone from just exploring the world. There's a lot of stuff to see, even without an objective. So you can find random quests in the middle of nowhere even. Or for example, these altars of Lilith that you can see here right now, these hidden objects that give you a permanent buff. So it can be quite fun to hunt those down as well. But in general, for fastest progression, make sure you always have some objective, and you're gonna find more on the way. And number 5, my final tip for this video, save backup gear and legendaries when you find them. So for most people, this is the first time playing this game. You will have no clue about what is good and what is not and what you wanna try. And in the end, it's best to just have the options available. So there's a stash, it's not really very large, but it allows you to store a bunch of items. So you can just go to the stash here in Kjorvashad, for example. There's like this icon there in the top in this house. And you can just like throw in some items to try out later. So especially once you get a few levels, you might start finding some legendary items that, for example, boost a certain skill or at least a certain archetype that you're not playing right now. So instead of just dismantling it, you can just throw it in there, and later on you can respec, maybe after you've reached max level. So you don't have to level a new character from scratch, and instead you can just experiment a little bit by saving up some gold, respecing the skill tree, and then using whatever other items you have. In the case of rogues, for example, you might want to save different types of weapons like bow and crossbow, or swords and daggers, or the same for the barbarian with those different types of two-handed weapons or one-handed weapons they can wear. So don't just focus on the one thing that you're doing right now, but leave yourself the option to also try something else later. And with this, I conclude this video here. Hope you liked it. If you want to see more Diablo 4 content, I already have a playlist of something like 20 videos or so here on my channel. And obviously we have the Maxwell page with a bunch of guides and game mechanics, etc. already explained. You can go check that out in the description as well. I wish everyone a good start for the open beta. Let's hope that the servers don't blow up on Friday, and make sure to subscribe for more content. Hope you liked this one, and see you guys next time.